Welcome Life Science learners to another installment. Trust that you guys are ready and looking forward to our lesson. Today we're focusing on the revision of nutrition. We've spent some time in the past looking at the various little components and concepts in nutrition. In our lesson today, we're going to have an overview of all of that, and we're going to try and apply our understanding to some revision questions. It is important that before we get into the lesson that we have an overview of the core concepts, consult some terminology, and as I always say, ensure that you are able to create a list of terms. And that is fundamental to a revision lesson around a topic. So let's get straight into the lesson, have an overview of the core concepts, spend some time unpacking some terminology, and then we will try applying our understanding to different types of questions. It's important that I mention terms are reviewed and then we have an overview of the core concepts. Let's look at the core concepts in this topic around nutrition. It's important that we reflect on nutrition in various different animals, and we spend some time looking at the diet of omnivores, carnivores and herbivores. We also looked at how their teeth structure was adapted for their modes of nutrition. It's important that we're able to recognize that different animals have a different arrangement of teeth, size and structures also vary, and that is essentially an adaptation to supply energy based on the food they eat. We mentioned the terms herbivores, carnivores and omnivores, and we looked at their diet. We also spoke about dentition and the adaptation for feeding. It's important that we overview the process of digestion and the different stages involved in the process of digestion. We will have a look at the organs of the digestive system and understand how to label them and how to describe their functions. It's important that we look at the process of homeostasis and the regulation of blood sugar levels in the body. We also need to recognize that there are different diets and what are nutritional disorders and what these relate to when we talk about nutritional choices that individuals make. We spent some time looking at food allergies, the importance of supplements, and reading nutritional information on the packaging. Let's have an overview of some of the main concepts in our terms. So the discussion around what happens when we chew food, forming a ball of food called the bolus. We also know the importance of bile as a product that is produced by the liver that helps in the emulsification or breakdown of fat. We also spoke about the pancreas being an exocrine and endocrine gland and its role in the production of chemicals or enzymes as well as hormones, which are discussed when we talk about maintaining homeostasis. So we talk about insulin and glucagon. An important concept of peristalsis is how the muscles contract and move and propel the food along the digestive system. The component of chyme, which is what is seen as a product that moves from the stomach into the small intestine after it is mixed with digestive juices. The villi, or the structure of the villus, is very important in us understanding the adaptation of the small intestine for the process of absorption and maximizing the nutrients from the intestine. Ingestion, digestion, absorption and assimilation are the key concepts of how food is digested, absorbed and assimilated in the body. We also must reflect on the term mastication, which is the chewing of food. We've mentioned several different enzymes that are important in the process of digestion along the digestive system. Emulsion again is what happens when fat droplets mix with bile and break down into smaller particles. We also referred to the different enzymes and that break down your carbohydrates, your proteins and your lipids. We also looked at the function of the central lacteal, or the structure inside the villus that absorb the nutrients such as fats and amino acids. The concept of metabolism is important as the chemical process that take place in an individual. Guys, as we get into revising any section, it's important that you're able to reflect using diagrams And so I've pasted in a diagram on the alimentary canal. So you need to know the glands, the organs, and their functions. And so let's start with a recap. We know that food is ingested through the mouth, and as it moves through the mouth, it obviously is processed by the teeth and broken down. Food mixes with saliva from the salivary glands. It then travels down the esophagus into the stomach, where chemical digestion begins. We also see the role of the liver and the gallbladder in the production and the storage of bile, and how that then empties its contents into the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. We must look at the function of the pancreas as an organ that produces hormones and enzymes. We then further continue with the small intestine as the jejunum, ending with the ileum. We then point to the large intestine being the colon, which has the ascending colon, the transverse colon, along with the descending colon. And finally, we see the waste products being stored and then egested via the rectum through the anus. And that's an overview of both the organs along with the accessory organs of the alimentary canal. As I mentioned, it's important that we reflect on the processes such as ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and egestion as the key components or stages in the process of nutrition. This is illustrated in the flow chart, which I often use to remind myself of how food has to go through various processes to be finally assimilated and released. And as I always mention, it's important that you have an overview of the functions of the different organs. So use the diagrams to be able to have a sense of the different functions and what they play in the process of digestion. Before we wrap up this section, let's test the waters. Let's try and see if we can apply some of our understanding to a few multiple choice questions. I've put in a few. Let's try that before we get into a break. So there are various answers that are given, and we've got to select the correct option. Let's look at question 1.1. Which of the following substances can directly be absorbed by the blood without further digestion? It's quite a tricky question because it refers to a substance that can be absorbed directly without any further breakdown. So guys, we've got proteins, and if we think of proteins, proteins are complex structures, and these need to be broken down into amino acids. So those have to undergo some form of digestion before being absorbed. The next group is starch. Again, starch is a complex carbohydrate that needs to be broken down into glucose before it is absorbed. So that cannot be absorbed directly. We know that glucose is a simple monomer. It's the simplest form of carbohydrate that is easily and rapidly absorbed without having to undergo any chemical breakdown. And we know that fats, guys, are broken up into fatty acids and lipids. So when we look at this question, which of the following substances can be directly absorbed? The answer here is C. And if you reflect on what many energy drinks contain, they contain large amounts of glucose, and that is so that the glucose can be readily absorbed without having to go through chemical breakdown. And that is what gives the release of energy immediately when consuming an energy drink. And so guys, again, it's important that when you read a multiple choice question that you're able to read through the options, eliminate the obvious ones, and then focus on the ones that are most likely to be correct. And it's important that you apply that understanding in the context of multiple choice questions. One more before we have a little break. The question reads, the concentration of which of the following substances are normally higher in the hepatic portal vein than in most other veins in the human body? So guys, if we look at the hepatic portal vein, the word hepatic portal vein refers to the vein that is coming from the liver. Okay? So if we look at that, guys, remember that the function of the liver is to break down excess amino acids. So we refer to that as the deamination of excess amino acids. It also plays an important role in the removal of toxins from the body. So let's look at this. So oxygen, yes, there would be less oxygen because obviously the cells in the liver use some oxygen. Glucose, again, remember that the liver plays an important role in taking the glucose and storing it as glycogen. So yes, a large amount of glucose can be stored. Remember that this is the hepatic portal vein that we're talking about. And this would have a larger amount of urea. Remember that urea is a waste product that is produced. And finally, carbon dioxide. So let's go back to that question and try and unpack which is the most correct answer. And I'm going to read this for the benefit of us all. So the concentration of which of the following substances are normally higher in the hepatic portal vein than in most other veins in the human body? Guys, remember that the vein is going to carry blood away from the liver. And the liver predominantly is going to remove excess glucose. Yes, it's also going to produce urea. And that we would see as being significantly higher when compared to any other part in the or vessel in the body. So the answer for this question would be C. So guys, I've presented to you with two multiple choice questions. Often these answers can be very confusing. It requires that you reflect on your understanding and apply your collective understanding of the various components and answer these questions. Guys, you've been good. Let's have a little break, and when we get back, we will try and do a few more revision questions to sharpen our understanding in this section. See you in a bit.